Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
If you do that, you don't have that tendency to think, oh, why did we get this? We need to get rid of that. There's no space for this.
It really tells you the backstory of what was involved in the 1850s of getting a life-size marble sculpture from Rome to St. Louis.
It actually is a great dance between many concepts and many American narratives.
Such fascinating, just random things in here. One of the things that I couldn't help but be struck by is you have a photo album from General William Tecumseh Sherman. What is in his photo album?
Well,
I'm Sarah Fensky. The oldest surviving library west of the Mississippi is 175 years old. The St. Louis Mercantile Library began celebrating that milestone earlier this year, unveiling a special exhibition devoted to its most significant holdings. It's titled A Nation, a City, and its First Library, Americana as a Way of Life at the St. Louis Mercantile Library. Now, last week, our producer Evie Hemphill stopped by to see the exhibit for herself. She got a tour from fine arts curator Julie Dunn Morton. Julie started with a section devoted to important firsts west of the Mississippi.
So this section will have something as serious as the first book of law, but also the first novel, the first sheet music, the first time the word St. Louis shows up on a map, or even the first image of St. Louis known to be printed. And that's actually on a $10 banknote.
And Julie explained that the Mercantile Library's story is in some ways the story of St. Louis.
Really, the Mercantile was living that time. We were founded in 1846. Our history, our collection building, just was right in the heart of that. And so that history of Americana is kind of our history.
Again, that's Julie Dunn Morton. And she explained that the library's process of acquiring pieces goes back to the 19th century. A great example of how it does that work is Harriet Hosmer's marble sculpture, Beatrice Cenci.
Like, this was a letter from Harriet Hosmer to Wayman Crowe, who was one of the founders of the Mercantile Library and was also her primary American patron. And he arranged for the commission of the Beatrice sculpture and for it to come here from Rome. So it's that in a nutshell. Like, for me as an art historian, you think about the interconnectedness of people, that this artist from Boston met this young woman at school from St. Louis. They become fast friends. The artist visits her here in St. Louis. The friend's father becomes really inspired by this young woman's passion to be an artist and basically helps launch her career and then arranges for this sculpture to come here. So it comes from Rome to London to Philadelphia to Boston, may have been in New York, I'd have to check my details. And then it has to go by boat to New Orleans and up the river to us. And there's far more documents in our archive related to a thank you letter to the riverboat captain who brought the sculpture up from New Orleans. It's just, it really tells you the backstory of what was involved in the 1850s of getting a life-size marble sculpture from Rome to St. Louis.
And that is fine arts curator Julie Dunn Morton speaking about the St. Louis Mercantile Library and its long history of extraordinary collections. Now, that exhibit detailing its first 175 years opened in April and should be open until at least next April. It's free and it's open to the public. And joining us today to talk more about it is John Hoover. He's the executive director of the St. Louis Mercantile Library. John, welcome.
Oh, yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah. And wasn't Julie great? You know, I was just thinking about her rendition of what happened in those days with the Hosmer's sculpture and how magnificent that was. But I think even more striking these days is that at times Rome institutions, European institutions, are always wanting to borrow our art, and that's one of the things that's highly desirable. So it kind of makes a full circle with the way that the Mercantile was given and that it continues to give.
So with that full circle, I want to go back to the beginning of that circle. This library was founded in 1846. Who did the founding?
Well, it was, a lot of people wonder, well, what's the Mercantile? What is that? It must be a business library. No, the early American libraries in this country, like this one, or the Boston Athenaeum, or the New York Society Library, were founded by merchants, by people with the means. The Library Company of Philadelphia. Company is a big word there. These were merchants, are business leaders who had enough resources to put together to build a book collection for the community. So we were the first public library in that sense, in making these collections available that way. People pooled their resources to let everyone have a chance to read.
So where was the earliest home of this establishment?
We were right down on the riverfront, literally Maine and Pine, and that we were there for a year. And the founders thought, well, this. We need to kind of move away. It was the old Exchange building, not the Merchants Exchange, but something older than that. We moved up to 4th Street, and it was a good thing we did because the building burned down in 1849 along with everything else with the fire. So we witnessed all of that. Then we had our eye on the Locust Street address where we resided for 150 years downtown.
So this was for a long time a downtown St. Louis institution. And from reading your foreword to this exhibit, this wasn't just a collection. What went on at this library in its early days?
Well, it's what you would think of as a forum or an athenaeum of many things. It was a lecture society, a debating society, a school. It was where people met to read and to learn and to discourse about the travelers that were coming through. My mind just is boggled. I just get boggled to think about the people traveling into St. Louis from the west and people moving from the east to the west and being in this grand city that was right here at the epicenter, and they would meet in the library, soldiers, explorers, scientists, and the city founders would be, the fathers would be here, and mothers. Women were admitted immediately. It was just a great forum of the community for that time.
And was this a lending library at any point in its history, or was it always there to gather these things?
It's always been a lending library. It was funny. We're known as membership libraries, some of the last surviving of these institutions, and our members are the core of our support. And for a $5 membership in those days, you could have circulating privileges for the collection, and then it's funny, we didn't raise those rates until 1958 when we doubled the price to $10. That was the Time magazine put a headline out said overdue. The New Yorker, it caused a stir that such an ancient institution would raise its rates, but everybody applauded that, and so we did. We always had circulating collections as well as special collections. It's something very unique in library history that this frontier library, if you will, actually wanted to document and to collect for the future, as well as create a place where people could read the current literature. Sometimes that blends, because the first edition of Moby Dick now was read and there as a new book, and then it became a rare book later.
You also have these fine arts. I imagine those weren't getting lent out to members. Those were just there for the edification of people when they visited?
Well, that's what's so wonderful about this place. I mentioned some of the things that we did, like even a theater, we had so many things going on. But the library really was founded on the collecting of books, papers, and art. We were the city's first art museum, the first art gallery. And now today, as a research institution at St. Louis, and for all of these students, what we present are research collections in rare books, papers, and art. And so it's really gone full circle, and those were the concentrating factors that we've always had. That's what's defined our institution.
So you've been thinking a lot about this history, maybe even more so than usual because of this 175th year anniversary. When did you start thinking about this celebration and this exhibit that honors it?
Well, I've worked here at the Mercantile for nearly 40 years, and I've directed it for about 30 of those years. But I always felt that when we turned 150, that was a wonderful thing, the first cultural institution in the city to do that. I thought, well, 175 is when we're going to write, and write largely about the collections here for the future, for the staff, for the members, for the readers, for the general St. Louis population, and actually for people in the rare book world. And so I've been thinking about this for 25, 30, 40 years. It's always news to me when a great institution in a great city turns a certain age. And maybe I probably won't be around to write the 200th anniversary history, but we'll have somebody doing that too. I'm already thinking about it.
You're ready for the next one. Well, so this current exhibit, this is called A Nation, a City, and Its First Library, Americana as a Way of Life at the St. Louis Mercantile Library. What do you mean by Americana in that title?
Well, it's so interesting. You may consider Americana might be sort of an object or a coin or some sort of a sculpture on an American eagle. Yes, that's Americana. But Americana in the book world and the world of manuscripts is really the narrative focus, the force of Americans taking down their accounts and their stories. And that actually you can move that forward to the brushstrokes of artists who were great American artists. And so, to me, it's really the woven nature of this collection, of how it's a very broad collection in terms of many subjects, but it's very, very deep when it comes to American history, because here we were, very early time in a city that was burgeoning, and we wanted to collect in this way to document American history and how St. Louis and its people and the people of America all sort of danced with us in terms of their what they took down, what they wrote, what their narratives were. It was never a surprise to me that the largest collections in this institution were the old Cutter E class. That was narrative biography.
So people's stories about the people who were in and around these parts.
Yes, absolutely.
So the scope of this exhibition, showing off the highlights gathered in 175 years, this might feel a bit overwhelming to somebody coming for the first time. Where would you suggest visitors begin?
Well, excellent question. It's in 9 galleries. It's in 9 galleries and more. And I suppose the way we laid it out is pretty much that. I think when one comes in and looks at first, Americana has a lot to deal with firstness, firsts and onlys. Like Julie mentioned, the first book, the first book of poetry, the first time that Missouri or Mississippi occurred on a map. That's on level 2. That's at the very beginning of this exhibition. Then one kind of walks down into the atrium. It's sort of like walking in the old Guggenheim Museum in New York. You're kind of going in circles all the way to level 1. But the second part are where the some only known copies of things are, and that would be something I'd see on the first trip too. That's the narrative of the founding of St. Louis by Auguste Chouteau. There's nothing like it in American history that a founder actually put something like that in words and writing, but also the the only known photograph of a lead line throw is in the atrium.
I'm sorry, the only known photograph of what?
Of a lead line throw. That's marking Twain. It's an image that was taken in St. Louis about 90 years ago of someone on the river marking Twain for a steamboat. It's a magnificent image, and a Rocky Mountain man's fur trade ledger from 1832. There's nothing else like that in existence, and we have that with the Dewey defeats Truman photograph, which the Mercantile acquired when the St. Louis Globe-Democrat went out of business. So it's one of the great photographic treasures of not just this institution but the country. So first, and a Columbus letter. Those are the first and onlys, really, that we could offer into this city. So something like that is very, very special. Those would be the way I would start. And then probably on the first day of maybe 6 or 7 trips, I would go downstairs and look at the really the core of the exhibition, American people, their narratives and achievements, where we sort of interwove famous people in St. Louis that had national influence and also influence here at the library, to show how the library lived history with certain people from the very beginnings of its time.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome back. Our guest today is John Hoover, Executive Director of the St. Louis Mercantile Library. The library is the oldest surviving library west of the Mississippi. It's celebrating its 175th anniversary. It has a free exhibition open to the public that shows highlights from its holdings, and there are so many highlights here. But John, we talked about the early days. The library was downtown. The library moved to the campus of the University of Missouri St. Louis in 1998. That's a big change, much different space than being downtown. What led to that change?
Oh, that's excellent to bring that up. Thank you, Sarah. We were really considered really part of the cultural heart of our area in Locust Street. That was the old financial district, and I think our board was very, very really proactive in noticing that even though we're really well known around the country and world, and we're used all the time, and we're the go-to place for people to use us for their own other projects, other museums and institutions, we weren't being a student's library any longer. We weren't having the walk-through with the usefulness in that part of town that we had, say, in the 1870s or the 1920s. And it was always a busy place, but it wasn't becoming as busy any longer. And so our board really started to think about, well, how can we make that better? And I'm so grateful that to a person, they felt, let's get on a college campus. Let's see if a college campus would appreciate these collections and how they could be made available in the broadest humanistic sense to students of all kinds. And I'm so glad they did that. Every college and everybody wanted us, but UM St. Louis worked out a very, very careful plan that made the library have a future of growth and building the collections that we were always very good at. I have such talented curators and a dedicated ensemble, and I'm just one of 10 library directors that had the same privilege to work with people who built this collection, and we were building it, all of us, for the good of students. So to be offered, to be invited, here to be part of the UM St. Louis library system was just marriage made in heaven for us.
And do you find that a lot of students, people who aren't there for a specific research purpose, but students who just come down and are checking these things out for themselves?
All the time, and basically it's never we're all back to this is our since the COVID pandemic really hit us all so hard. This is the first semester back where I'm seeing not only our students but students from around the city and scholars from the country all wanting to come in and use our collections once again. It's like a homecoming for us. I guess a traditional fall homecoming for the students to be with us. Yes, I see that, and I see the great interest, and it seems as if the tours of prospective students, it seems like we're the first stop, really, for people to see the institution, and we invite everyone to do. It's a way that we can celebrate and honor the founders of this institution, who were remarkable people, far-sighted people, and by continuing to make these collections available to the widest number of students.
So in addition to people who come by to check out the collections, you have continued to collect. You write in the exhibit catalog that the library is not, quote, caught in a time warp. You write, for a time spanning 3 centuries, the Mercantile collected currently and often lived history. The library does so today. We preserved on the spot Ferguson window paintings on the boards covering riot-smashed windows. The Mercantile immediately set about collecting the new city-county merger documents from a year or two ago to add to the many past attempts to unshackle city growth and progress, as well as newspapers across the world reflecting the stories of the age, pandemics, terrorism, disasters, and achievements. So how do you go about deciding what belongs in this much-vaunted collection?
Well, space is always a big factor, but we've never let that scare us. We've always we're a broad and a deep collection, and we've never really had some great institutions. This is their decision, not ours, but to sort of have a cutoff date about what they would collect. One very great institution uses 1876 as a benchmark that way.
Wow.
We feel that we're very, can you imagine though, we feel that so much of American history, Americana, was as much after that date as in the years of the colonies and the early republic. We collected that too, but what we wanted to do is to have a broad collection that really spans all aspects of this nation and to some extent world history as it relates to a library in St. Louis collecting that and observing it.
Do you continue to collect very old things as well?
Well, a few years ago, one of our donors said, John, you've always wanted one. We collect early printing. It's something where people can study. We collect book arts. We especially collect fine printing that relates to American history and American stories. But to teach fine printing, it's always good to have incunabula, early printing of the earliest days, and we were able to collect a binding fragment of a Gutenberg Bible leaf, and that's one of our earliest pieces. But we have an Assyrian slab from 3,000 years ago from Nineveh.
Wow.
We preserve and treasure writing of all kinds. It tells the story of what we're all about.
So getting to spanning the gamut here, one of the more contemporary displays was the exhibit of Chuck Berry's scrapbooks. I understand these are on loan, but this is something that is part of what you're showing off.
Absolutely, and when the chance to work with the Berry family and the estate came to us, we said, sure, these need to be preserved and saved, and they loved the idea that I wanted to work these in, to the exhibit. What more American Americana would be Chuck Berry's own hand, his narrative in his scrapbooks. As I've talked about narrative, this is a great Americana narrative. Its scrapbooks are sort of like one author called them writing with scissors. And so that's essentially why we did that. it's been magnificent. That and I like to see that juxtaposed with the Casey Jones whistle from the folk song. Well, the original is here, as well as say the first sheet music that the city ever published, the St. Louis Grand March. That's on display. So that's how this collection dances. It actually is a great dance between many concepts and many American narratives.
Yeah, and just such fascinating, just random things in here. One of the things that I couldn't help but be struck by is you have a photo album from General William Tecumseh Sherman. What is in his photo album?
Well, we have several. He actually was a board member here briefly, and he left us a lot of his grand tour albums of the Near East, but he also left us great American albums of photographs. One of the greatest is a remarkably rare work, Scenes in Indian Life, Scenes in the Indian Territory. And these are identified Native Americans that were done for the general. 5 generals received that. His copy came to the Mercantile. It's one of our really treasured pieces. He gave us some of our truly remarkable folio American albums.
You told our producer the other day, a collection like this always keeps giving. Some things we have now may not be fully appreciated until another generation or two. Once something is in this collection, does it always remain in the collection? Or could it be that something's been collected and you look at it and this just doesn't make sense in light of, as you say, you've got some space limitations?
Well, in my time, that's not going to happen. I think there's I guess I sort of pretty much am like that. There was an old book collector in this town named William Bixby, and the symbol on his book plate was an omnivorous octopus, where each tentacle was holding every book. And I feel like the strength of this institution is to collect dramatically, often, and as well and as intelligently as possible. If you do that, you don't have that tendency to think, oh, why did we get this? We need to get rid of that. There's no space for this. And so my entire career, I've tried to train others is to collect well and to build, and so that we really truly don't burden the future with maybe too much of something, and try to do it in a very eloquent way.
Mm-hmm. Well, this exhibit is certainly worth checking out. I hope people will put together the week's worth of time they need to visit for 7 days. If not, though, there's certainly highlights, as you said, right there in the atrium. People can come check this out. This is open to the public. It's free, and it's open any hours that the University of Missouri St. Louis's libraries are open. So there's lots of opportunities to check this out. People can see umsl.edu/mercantile for more information. We'll also have that on our website, stlonair.show. So, John Hoover, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Have everyone come and talk to us. We'd love to see everyone. Thank you.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here. If you learned something new from today's episode, consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the easiest way to help people discover our show. We appreciate it. Thank you. St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.